Hey everyone, doing a video tonight in reference to the Israel-Gaza situation, and I'm focusing on Mohammed Hijab. Now, this is not a video on the conflict itself as such. I'm making a distinction. This is about Mohammed Hijab and his self-centered way of using this conflict to elevate his own status. Now, I make that distinction because this man doesn't make videos on the Israel-Gaza situation. What he does is he starts Twitter wars and YouTube conflicts to get himself attention, essentially. Rage begging for more interviews with whoever he can to raise the status of his channel. And I just think it's pretty disgusting behavior. As I say, I am going to do a live stream about the conflict at a later point, but I can make the distinction between reacting to someone and reacting to the actual conflict. For this man, it's all one in the same. Now, the first video I'm going to touch on, he did about a week ago, and he titled it basically responding to Ben Shapiro. So it shows his intention right there, but most of it is just him ranting and raving as usual. But I've just got a couple of segments that I want to show you before I move on to the next one.
Surely there can be boots on grass. Surely you can be a man. The IDF can be men, real brave, real gallant, real courageous, which is something you can't fathom or don't know anything about. You have no fortitude at all. You have not shown any ability to engage with people even on an intellectual and conversational level. That's how lacking of fortitude that you are. Why don't they go face to face with Hamas? Fight them.
Right, so this first section is important because it shows two things. Number one, this is all rhetoric aimed at Ben Shapiro, okay? This isn't actually about the conflict itself. Now, he does plenty of ranting and raving like a child in this video, but this gets down to the nub of it. Number one, he is now trying to rage beg again for a debate with Ben Shapiro. This is what he sees the conflict as most useful for, his own personal ends. Secondly, look at the attitude he's got, and this continues throughout this video. He's basically calling for a war between Hamas and Israel. Now, I'm going to get into this in more detail, but if he really cared about the Palestinian people, this is the last thing he would want to do.
And I think you've been watching a lot of my videos because you're starting to use my vernacular.
He has an unfortunate history of being pusillanimous about all this.
Pusillanimous? I don't know of any better word to describe you. A person who's been challenged in debate for a very, very long time. And all you can approach.
So once again, he's using this conflict as a way to try and get a debate with Ben Shapiro. Like, that is the most important thing right now. Whatever position you take on what's going on in Israel and in Gaza, it should not be about personality clashes on Twitter and YouTube. And this is what this man cares about. This is how he titles his videos. This is how he responds to the devastation going on over there at the moment, to try and rage beg for attention. And it really is an insult to people who've died on both sides that people like him with his influence are doing this.
As a college student, just like the IDF, cowardly. You're cowardly because the IDF want low risk, high reward. And for them, a high reward is high civilian casualties, where they're pressing buttons in planes when they're very safe, but they don't want face-to-face confrontation. What?
Right, again, I mean, I don't know what planet this guy is living on, but you can see again what he's doing is he's geeing up. He's trying to pump people up to say, yeah, let's have a big war between Hamas and the IDF. Like, that's a really great idea for the citizens of Palestine, isn't it?
I mean, why haven't we seen boots on ground? This is absolutely cowardly behavior.
See, he's actually calling for a land invasion. This is what he wants. What person who cared about the Palestinian state would want a land invasion by several 100,000 IDF troops?
Why is there aerial bombardment, which affects a majority of civilians?
There's aerial bombardment because regardless of the situation, this is a war. This is not a computer game. If you've got aircraft, you'll use them.
Why are you advocating this? You're a coward. The IDF are cowards, no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
You can shout about them being a coward, but that's not the point, is it? The point is, what's going to happen on the ground?
Pusillanimous. You're a puss. You're a puss. I can't see a bigger puss than you. Cannot think of a bigger puss than you. Don't use that term as if you've got something.
So again, it's just more thuggish mentality. It's more about him showing his rage, like trying to act like it's a fight in a school playground between him and Ben Shapiro. This is the level that he reduces this terrible conflict to. It's all about him screaming and shouting. Again, if there's any Muslims watching this video, right, regardless of what position you're taking, this man is not your champion. He does not give a damn about the people suffering in this situation. Anyways, moving on to this second video. Now, this one came a few days before he's recently done this Ben Shapiro interview. And essentially, he's doing the same two things, rage begging and basically warmongering, saying that he wants a full-on conflict between Hamas and the IDF. And it just shows, again, his ego and his idiocy around this whole thing.
I've made a video about Ben Shapiro yesterday, and he has responded. He's responded.
No, he didn't respond. He happened to be on Piers Morgan, who played the video.
On Piers Morgan's uncensored show. So let's take a look at what he says and respond in kind. You'll know.
Right, he plays a minute of their conversation, which isn't really relevant, but I just want to get straight back to his reaction because it's just so childish.
Notice that what he said is that, of course, I feel horrible, he says. Of course, I feel horrible for what Hamas is doing for the last 15 years. So you see, the key question that I put forward, which Piers couldn't carry over properly and ask properly, by the way, which he asked all Palestinian representatives, do you condemn the attacks? Do you condemn the attacks? Which was my question to Ben Shapiro. Do you condemn the attacks?
Well, I mean, you had a lot of questions to Ben Shapiro in your video, but the point is, why are you putting questions to Ben Shapiro, okay? Everyone on the planet knows that he is pro-Israel and will take a hardline stance. So this is just your ego because you want a fucking Twitter war with someone.
Couldn't, and he didn't, and he wouldn't answer that question. Why? Because everything must be scapegoated to Hamas.
Well, to be fair, and again, I'm not getting into the conflict in this video too much, but to say scapegoat it to Hamas is kind of ridiculous, regardless of the history and everything else that's gone on. They did launch that attack, all right? So it's not scapegoating to say that they did launch that attack.
Everything must be scapegoated to Hamas. Even before Hamas was an entity, the terrorism narrative was still in force by the Israelis against the secular PLO. This cannot and it will not fly anymore. Secondly, my question to Piers Morgan is, why didn't you ask this man the same question that you ask all the Palestinian representatives? Do you condemn the attacks which disproportionately affect women and children? Why is it that the killing of Jewish men, women, and children who are non-combatants must be labeled as terrorism, but that the killing of men, women, and children who are in the Gaza Strip by the IDF forces, where there can be an alternative motion, and I'll tell you what that is in a second, is...
Right, and this is the important thing. This is really, as I say, I'm not going to get into the whole ethics of the either side of this conflict, certainly not in this video. But the point is, again, it seems like he's sort of, okay, right, you're going to make your point of view from the kind of pro-Palestinian side. But look at what he builds to. This is really, again, what this man's mentality is about.
Not condemned. What is that thing? Because I said I'll say it in a second. They've made it out as this is the only option. They said this is the only option. That's not actually logically the case. It's not logically the case that the only option to fight Hamas is to disproportionately affect civilians, women, and children. What other options are there? Face-to-face confrontation with Hamas.
Face-to-face confrontation with Hamas. So once again, he's basically wants to have a full-on battle between Hamas and IDF. Now, again, regardless of the history of this conflict or the ethics of it, whatever side you're taking, let's just look at reality. Hamas has got what? 20, 30,000 fighters maybe. The IDF can call upon what? 350,000 reservists, as well as I think they've got 150,000 regular army. So something like 500,000, I think, as well as sophisticated tanks and airplanes. You know, what do you think the result of this conflict would be? And I'm just asking this. He's supposed to be pro-Palestinian, right? And what he wants is a full-on battle in Palestine, which has a potential to level the Gaza Strip, and it would lead to tens of thousands of civilians dying no matter what, because there's still going to be some people who aren't going to leave the area. And Hamas would be absolutely wiped out. Yet this is what he's calling for, because he's a warmonger, he's bloodthirsty, and he does it from the safety of his London home. He doesn't care about who would die in the crossfire. He just wants his little jihadi conflict.
Face-to-face confrontation with Hamas. Targeted attacks of them. You can attack them directly and you can have a fight with them. Why?
Well, they are. This is the whole point. They're getting ready for a ground invasion. I mean, it's been on the cards for the last few days. And at some point, they probably will go. And the Israeli army has got the power to go block to block throughout the Gaza Strip, rooting out those Hamas fighters. They could destroy every single building in the Gaza Strip. Again, I'm not talking about the ethics of any of this. I'm just talking about the brute facts on the ground. So you're a fucking idiot to call for this, because all that's going to happen is, yes, IDF will probably take some casualties. Hamas will be wiped out. Gaza will be a smouldering ruin, and there will likely be tens of thousands of civilian deaths on the Palestinian side. This is what you're calling for.
One-on-one, face-to-face, man-to-man, woman to woman, if you've got them in your IDF forces.
I mean, listen to the way he's talking. Man-to-man, one-on-one. This is not a street fight. This is a fucking war, you idiot. You really think they're going to get out their tank and like fight hand-to-hand combat or something? Or do you just see yourself as like some kind of 21st century Salah ad-Din? This war ain't taking place on horseback. This is not 1,000 years ago. This is modern technology. They're not just going to get out and have one-on-one hand-to-hand combat. They're going to blow the crap out of you. And how many Palestinians will suffer because of this? This is what this man, this is the champion of the Palestinian cause. This is what he is promoting.
Let them fight. Why do you have to kill 95% of the injured are civilians? More than that. Maybe 99% of the civilians.
A conflict is going to have civilian casualties no matter what. Even if Israel fought the cleanest war possible, even if the vast majority of citizens evacuate, as, I mean, at a time of recording this, I think something like 600,000 of the Gazans in the northern part of the country have fled south. And that still leaves 400,000 or 500,000 there. So even if you fight the cleanest possible war, there's going to be tens of thousands of casualties, plus the displacement and the lack of resources and everything else. There's going to be thousands more deaths, most likely. Yet this guy is cheering that on because of pride, because of ego, because, again, he doesn't care about the Palestinian civilians. He doesn't care about the reality on the ground. He cares about his jihadist mentality and having some glorious war for the caliphate. It's pathetic.
People who are injured are civilians. Do not make this out to be the only option. We are not dumb. We're not stupid. We're not.
You are stupid if you honestly think that that's an option. You honestly think the IDF are going to come out and fight one-on-one, hand-to-hand combat. This is urban warfare. It's brutal and it's ugly, even in the best of circumstances.
Foolish. Do not equate Israel has a right to defend itself with Israel has a right to annihilate, a civilian population.
What you are calling for, direct warfare, is the best way to cause as many civilian casualties as possible. Again, I'm not talking about the ethics of any of this in this video. I'm just talking about practical reality. It's a war. This is not a bloody computer game.
And look what he says. He says, frankly, I don't believe, that a proportionate response to terrorism. I don't believe in a proportionate response to terrorism. I believe that the response to terrorism should be wildly disproportionate response. That doesn't mean targeting civilians. He's using his words very clearly, not targeting them, but implicating them, yes. Implicating the majority of them, yes, Are you telling me that, okay, it doesn't mean targeting them, but if you're going to do an action which is going to assure, beyond reasonable doubt, that the majority target is going to be civilians, that's not, in a sense, targeting civilians?
What you are proposing is the worst possible thing. They've got the firepower to flatten the northern half of Gaza if it ended up being all-out warfare. I mean, hell, you should look at some of the pictures of places like Warsaw towards the end of World War II, because that's what Gaza could look like if you get your little wet dream of this jihadi war.
This is a wild contradiction, and I know that you know that. I know that you know that. I know Piers Morgan knows that. I know Ben Shapiro knows that. I know the Daily Wire knows that. I know the British public know that.
So again, Ben Shapiro, Piers Morgan, Daily Wire. I mean, really, you should have enough character to say that this is not about personalities. This is about the people suffering on the ground. But everything is an ego contest with you. Everything is a conflict online with you because that's the world you live in. You don't care about the Palestinians.
I know the American public know that. And I want to say something. When he was answering the question, didn't you see in his face him stammering and staggering and stuttering?
Well, I mean, I didn't play the clip, but I mean, I've watched it, and no, I didn't. Again, this is just more of your ego again. You feel like you got some victory over Ben Shapiro, so you're just like acting as if he's afraid of you. Do you not realize how childish this is?
Imagine that person who looked defeated already. Imagine that person who, he wasn't even with me face to face. He wasn't even responding me on a telelink.
He wasn't talking to you at all. This is all your own fever dream.
And soiled himself. Imagine him being probed, yeah, by the likes of someone like me.
Listen to that language. You've got to admit that that is creepy as hell. He does this all the time. He puts in this creepy kind of sexual assault language like he wants to be the abuser. I mean, it's so, it makes my skin crawl when he talks like this. And again, this is all about him. Nothing to do with the suffering civilians.
Just like the IDF are shit.
Yeah, I don't think the IDF are particularly scared. Again, I'm not talking about the ethics of any of this conflict. I'm just saying, look at the reality. They've got a highly mechanized army. They've got 10 times, at the very least, probably 20 times the number of fighters. They can obliterate Hamas if they really want to. And yet you think this stupid playground beating your chest does anything. Again, please don't let this man pump you up. Anyone who thinks that he cares about civilians, he doesn't.
Themselves from face-to-face confrontation. The only thing that they can do is press buttons in a fortified place. لا يقاتلونكم جميعا إلا في قرى محصنة أو من وراء جدر. They don't fight you all together except in a fortified place or behind walls.
Yeah, well, again, talking just from a practical point of view, it's called warfare. It's called tactics in battle. Yes, if you use defensive cover, you're going to use defensive cover. You honestly think that you're going to, like, shame the IDF somehow to, like, come out and, as I say, like, fight one-on-one, like with sticks or something? You're so primitive. You're so childish. And it's the ordinary people who are going to suffer for these kind of wet dreams of these Salafis, these jihadis who think there's going to be some glorious battle that they're going to win. No, you're just going to get obliterated and you're going to take a lot of innocent people with you.
That's what you're about. Low risk, high reward. You're cowards.
Says the man calling for war who sits in London, who would never, ever have to risk anything. Really easy to say, you know, low risk, high reward. This is everything about you.
And you all know that you're cowards. You all know that you're cowards.
Yeah, says the man who flies around the world to try and pick fights with old men in other countries because they burned the Quran or something. Yeah, you're real tough, mate.
Just like Ben Shapiro was staggering and stammering and stuttering, and he couldn't even contain himself. And you can see you can see the effects of the butterflies in his stomach, the diarrhea being created in his bowels because he couldn't. He knows who I am. He's watching my videos. Piers Morgan's watching my videos.
It's just ironic because, like, with the exception of the segment where I cut, where Piers Morgan and Ben Shapiro are talking, I've let play this entire video, right? How much has he talked about the actual conflict and how much he's talked about himself as if he's having a personal fight with Ben Shapiro? This should tell you all you need to know about this man's intention and about what he really cares about.
But they would never, on a fair one-to-one basis, come and discuss the matter with me. Do you think Piers Morgan,
again, rage begging for attention,
on fair grounds, would try and speak to me about an issue like this? Or Ben Shapiro, when they know what I'm going to come with?
Yeah, well, ironically, as we've all seen, or I'm sure many people have seen at this point, yeah, he did manage to get his little rage beg interview out of it, and he did go on Piers Morgan. I'll come to that in a minute. So even then, he's talking shit, but it just shows this is all he really wants. He just wants the attention.
Absolutely not. Don't pretend you don't know who I am. Don't pretend that I'm too small of a fish for you to understand. Especially
now, you're too dumb of a fish to understand, and you are not important in any of this.
Knowing that I've had 2 engagements with your biggest star, Jordan Peterson. Don't pretend anymore. You've been watching my videos. You know what I'm about. Your silence is deafening, and your cowardice is apparent. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yeah, so, I mean, there you go. I did delay this video a day because I wanted to see whether anything came out of this interview that he had on Piers Morgan. And to be honest, it's not even worth reviewing. I mean, I'm sure some people are going to go through it. I can't be bothered because when I watched it, there was just no value to it. I mean, he spent most of his time, again, wasting his time on things like how he was introduced. And, you know, he wants to be known as an Oxford graduate or something like this. Again, his own ego. And trying to do gotcha questions on Piers Morgan about getting fired from the newspaper he used to work at, Daily Mirror, or whatever it was. You know, he chewed up so much time. And to be fair, also, it was a bit of a shit show because Piers Morgan was just basically, he did actually overtalk him a fair bit. I will acknowledge that, and he did dodge a couple of questions. But most of the time, anyway, most of that 22-minute interview or whatever it was just a complete waste of time. It was again him fronting, beating his chest, you know, calling for basically, you know, an all-out war. And no, you know, just lip service to this idea that he cares about the Palestinians or anyone else but himself. So again, the take on this for me is that nobody, regardless of your position on what's going on in Israel and Gaza, should be listening to people like him because their agenda is about themselves and nothing else. And his ideal scenario would be an all-out war, which in all reality would probably wipe out the Gaza Strip. I mean, you could argue that this might even be the Israelis' intention at this point. They're pushing everyone towards the south. Maybe, you know, it could lead to the depopulation of the whole strip. That is not an unreasonable proposition. And this guy is essentially calling for the worst kind of bloodshed. Just keep that conflict going and make that the most likely reality to happen. So again, I'm not talking about the ethics of any of this. I will do a live stream later on, hopefully towards the end of this week. Maybe, and it'd be interesting if anyone wants to come join. Please leave a comment in my latest community post if you want to join in on that. So I do think it's important to talk about the actual conflict and the horrors of what are going on there at the moment. But again, all I would ask, particularly Muslims, anyone who's pro-Palestinian, you do not listen to the likes of Mohammed Hijab or any of these other Dawa cretins because they don't care about anyone but themselves. Anyways, yeah, I'll see you all in the next one.